If there's one word that could strike fear into the heart of the average Ukrainian right now, it's Oreshnik. Russia's missile flies at hypersonic speeds to deliver explosive destruction to whatever target the Kremlin chooses. Oreshnik is too fast for most air defense systems to handle, too powerful for Ukraine's cities to survive the blast, and upon Putin's command it can be loaded with nuclear warheads that would devastate Ukraine. Assuming it can hit the right target. In a matter of days, Oreshnik has gone from a global threat to a global joke. Why? Putin's so-called unstoppable missile is flying blind, making it a dud that could end up being more of a liability than threat to Ukraine. Not that you would know any of this if you listened to Russia. Earlier in the month, Russia unleashed yet another of its long-range strikes against Ukraine. Only this one was different. Among the usual drones and missiles that Russia employs during this strike, there was another weapon that Putin has said in the past will streak toward targets at speeds of around Mach 10, like a meteor. This symbol of Russian military might was unleashed on Ukraine, specifically targeting the city of Lviv, in a strike that took place on January 9th and was confirmed on January 10th. Lviv, which is located in Ukraine's western outskirts and is about as close to Poland as a major Ukrainian city can get, was a symbolic choice for Putin's use of Oreshnik. Here is a city which is a beautiful mix of classic Central European style and Western influences that lies on the cusp of NATO territory. Putin's message was simple. Lviv was hit because Russia's president wanted to put the West on notice about a new missile that could destroy NATO cities at the push of a button. The Kremlin has also claimed that Lviv was targeted for more practical reasons. In the wake of the Lviv strike, Russia's defense ministry unleashed a statement claiming that it had destroyed a key target in the city. On the night of January 9th, the Lviv State Aircraft Repair Plant was put out of action by the Oreshnik mobile ground missile system, the ministry claimed. But Russia's Ministry of Defense was hiding something. We'll reveal what that something was later in the video. But you'll get a nice little hint from what we have learned about Oreshnik since Russia's January 9th strike. It turns out that the unstoppable weapon, that is more meteorite than missile, if Putin is to be believed, has a severe and potentially fatal flaw. It may hit hard and move fast, but Oreshnik is designed so poorly that it may be flying blind. That's according to United 24 Media, which says that an analysis of the Oreshnik debris left behind in Lviv has revealed that the missile is lacking the type of guidance system that is required for independently steering its multiple warheads to their targets. In other words, Russia can get Oreshnik vaguely toward where it needs to go. But the missile, which is classified to carry multiple independently targetable re-entry vehicles or MIRVs, arrives, it drops them, and Russia hopes for the best. A partial analysis comes from the Military Russia Telegram channel, which published its findings on January 18th. A study of the remains of the Oreshnik missile demonstrated after January 8, 2026, as well as a re-examination of the remains from 2024, has led to the conclusion that the system's missile lacks individual disengagement pods, IDPs, the Telegram channel reports. That's a pretty big piece of the MIRV puzzle that's missing, as you'll learn in a little while. Rather than having these IDPs, the Oreshnik instead appears to utilize a sealed instrument compartment that is often seen in weapons produced by the Moscow Institute of Thermal Technology. These compartments aren't used for guidance, they stabilize warheads but don't steer them. Combining an instrument compartment with a rocket-assisted warhead orientation system, which appears to be a fancy way of saying that the Oreshnik's rockets point in the general direction of a target, and you get a missile that flies fast but fires blindly. The warheads are likely similar to classic unguided pods but instead carry a cassette with warheads. This totals to 6 warheads with 6 elements each, as confirmed by footage of the missile's use, military Russia says. Ukraine still has to be careful given this firepower. Stick with us and we'll explain what it's doing to prepare for any of Russia's future Oreshnik strikes. But before that, let's return to this idea of a MIRV that doesn't have guidance systems for its individual warheads and why that is such a bad idea. The entire concept behind a MIRV is to transform one missile into a multi-target striking behemoth that can wipe out several positions in a single strike. MIRVs have been around for a while, so it shouldn't have been hard for Russia to get the basics of installing a guidance system for each warhead right. The Center for Arms Control and Non-Proliferation says that MIRVs were developed during the 1960s to enable a single missile to deliver warheads to multiple targets. The importance of a working guidance system for these warheads cannot be underestimated. The entire point of any missile strike, MIRV or otherwise, is to provide a military force with the ability to deliver munitions quickly and precisely to a target. The idea should be that Putin can say, "I want to destroy a Ukrainian airfield," as Russia claims that it did in Lviv, and the Oreshnik should be able to do it. The missile arrives and unleashes its warheads. Those warheads then navigate independently for whatever targets are chosen, assuming they don't get destroyed by air defenses. This is a simple concept, But it's a complex thing to achieve from a technological standpoint, and it may just be that technology, or lack thereof, has been Russia's undoing when it comes to the Oreshnik. According to United 24 Media's report on the Oreshnik analysis, Russia's supposedly groundbreaking missile is far from the technological breakthrough that Putin and his cronies have claimed it to be. The outlet claims that journalists were shown components used in the Oreshnik missile's inertial navigation system, which is the system used by the missile itself and not the warheads. Some of those components bore manufacturing codes that suggest they were made back in 2018, which in turn alludes to the likelihood that they were made for a previous weapons program before being shoehorned into the Oreshnik missile that is supposed to be a marvel of modern technology. Militani adds its own analysis, noting that the Ukrainian experts who showcased these parts to the journalists added that they could see no evidence of fundamentally new technical breakthroughs. The Oreshnik, for example, contains electric vacuum tubes built during the Soviet era. Based on external characteristics, they are likely krytrons, components typically used as ultra-fast electronic switches, though it cannot be ruled out that they are high-frequency resonators, the outlet says. That's all well and good, but the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, which begs the obvious question: what are parts that are at least 35 years old doing in a missile that is supposed to represent the very best that Russia's modern innovators can come up with? Right now there isn't an answer, though the most likely reason seems to be that the Oreshnik isn't anywhere near as advanced as Putin claims it to be. This tracks with earlier claims that the Oreshnik is based on another Russian missile named the RS-26 Rubezh. This isn't a Soviet-era missile. However, Missile Threat says that it entered development in 2008, which may explain why we see components from 2018 in the modern-day Oreshnik missiles. The RS-26 hasn't made it into service yet, as it's currently still under development. It's unclear if the Oreshnik program replaced the RS-26 program, but if the claims of the Oreshnik being based on RS-26 are true, then all that the Oreshnik really has going for it is that it's a missile that can travel at hypersonic speeds. Beyond that, it's full of old components, and its warheads don't have guidance systems. Combine those two factors, and serious questions can be raised about how much of a threat Oreshnik actually is, at least in terms of it being capable to deliver precise attacks. Keep watching for the answer to that question, and if you're enjoying this video so far, like, subscribe, and leave any comments you have. Now let's come back to something that we touched on earlier. We told you that the news about Oreshnik's lack of guidance systems for its warheads was a hint at what Russia's Ministry of Defense may be hiding with its claims that its missile scored a direct hit on an airfield in Lviv. That hit may not have been as direct as Russia would have you believe. According to United 24 Media, analysis of Russia's January 9th Oreshnik strike on Lviv has revealed that the lack of guidance systems for the missile's warheads was on full display. Oreshnik is believed to be capable of unleashing up to 6 warhead clusters on its target. In Lviv, 4 of those warhead clusters managed to reach the ground in the city. United 24 Media doesn't mention if any of those warheads struck targets that offer any strategic value, but that will probably be alright with Putin. He's happy to terrorize Ukraine's cities even if Russia fails to take out any militarily important targets. You'll notice that 4 isn't equal to 6. But what happened to the other 2 warhead clusters? It appears that they were victims of their own lack of guidance systems as they flew away from Lviv. United 24 Media says that analysts have confirmed 2 separate impacts from the Lviv strike, which is likely to be the other 2 Oreshnik warheads. Both of these impacts happened at some distance away from what appears to have been Russia's intended target. There could be a few problems going on here, as Militani explains. This may suggest that the missile's ultra-high speed creates problems not only for accuracy in a conventional kinetic configuration, in which warheads contain no explosives and rely solely on mass and velocity, but also that not all warheads physically survive atmospheric re-entry, the outlet reports. The latter would be a major problem for Russia. Oreshnik is a ballistic missile. A ballistic missile flies so high that it exits the atmosphere, sometimes for up to 90% of its journey, depending on the distance it needs to travel to the target. If the warheads that the missile then deploys don't even make it through the Earth's atmosphere, then they're practically useless. Yes, the burned-up remains of the warhead might still strike the ground, but any sense of accuracy would go out of the window, as might whatever submunitions that the warhead was loaded with. If this is happening with Oreshnik, it may explain the 2 wayward warheads in the Lviv strike. Russia may also be relying on the kinetic energy built up by its Oreshnik warheads to deliver damage, as Militani pointed out. That could be a problem too, even if the Oreshnik warheads make it through the Earth's atmosphere unscathed or otherwise. This reliance on kinetic force may not be as damaging as Russia needs it to be. That's revealed in a Chinese study that Militani says was published in June 2025 by an armored vehicle researcher named Andriy Tarasenko. If that study is accurate, it suggests that all of Putin's claims about hypersonic weapons being extremely devastating may all be smoke and mirrors. The study's results showcase why, as revealed by Militani. Based on an experiment with a prototype ultra-high-speed kinetic projectile at a test range in the Gobi Desert, A tungsten rod weighing 140 kilograms and traveling at 4,650 meters per second struck the surface, forming a parabolic crater 3 meters deep and 4 meters in diameter, the outlet reports the study's authors is discovering. We need a little context here. 4,650 meters per second is about Mach 13.5. That's Mach 3.5 faster than the Mach 10 that Putin claimed that Oreshnik flew at back in November 2024. And with all of that speed, a 140 kilogram or 308 pound tungsten rod only managed to make a crater that was 9.8 feet deep and a little over 13 feet wide. That's only a handful of feet bigger in both directions than NASA's Curiosity rover, which NASA itself says is about the size of a small SUV. You wouldn't want to be hit by a 140 kilogram tungsten bar dropped from space, but that sort of crater doesn't suggest the sort of city-ending power that Putin has tried to claim that Oreshnik has. Now here's something interesting. If we assume that the claims of Oreshnik being based on Russia's RS-26 missile are true, that means we can also make some assumptions about the size of the Oreshnik warheads. According to a January 2025 article published by Meta Defense, the RS-26 has submunitions that weigh between 30 and 35 kilograms. You might note that this is less than a quarter of the weight of the tungsten rod in the Chinese study mentioned earlier. It's unclear whether less than a quarter of the weight also means less than a quarter of the impact crater. And equipping explosive warheads would certainly increase the amount of force delivered by an Oreshnik strike, assuming those warheads can even survive the Earth's atmosphere. It should also be noted that Oreshnik is believed to have 6 warheads, each with 6 clusters, adding up to 36 submunitions of this low weight. Still, all of this evidence seems to be adding up to a missile that not only fires blind, but also fires blanks. Well, not quite. However, compare even the tungsten rod's impact crater with Ukraine's own Flamingo missile-drone hybrid, and Oreshnik suddenly looks a little limp. In August 2025, the New Voice of Ukraine published comments made by the senior researcher at Ukraine's State Aviation Museum, Valery Romanenko. 2 hits and any Russian military factory will be out of commission. It will be disabled for at least a year. At the impact site, the crater will be roughly 20 meters in diameter, Romanenko said of Ukraine's Flamingo. That's 5 times the size of the crater left by the tungsten rod in the Chinese experiment, and it's a crater that comes from a weapon that is likely far cheaper to build than the Oreshnik. Not even hypersonic speeds can make up for that impact disparity. Oreshnik warheads or submunitions may be hard for air defenses to hit, but they may not do anywhere near as much damage as they need to do to make the missile worth using in any substantial volume. That brings us back to a question that we posed earlier in the video. How much of a threat is Oreshnik really? It's a hard question to answer because so much of what we know about the missile is either theoretical or comes from Russia, and thus can't be trusted. However, Ukraine is certainly taking no risks. On January 17th, Militani reported that Ukraine had conducted a strike against the training ground from which Russia launches its Oreshnik missiles. That training ground is in Kapustin Yar, which is in the Astrakhan region of Russia, and it's called the 4th State Central Inter-Service Training Ground. Ukraine reportedly targeted the site with drones, though it's unclear what the outcome of the strike was. Militani said that there are air defense systems operating at the site, so it's possible that Ukraine's attack wasn't successful, this time at least. But Ukraine's January 17th strike may have been proof of concept. According to CNN, the Oreshnik that Russia launched at Lviv would have had to travel about 1,000 miles to reach its target. Ukraine could cut the distance that one of its drones would have had to travel to hit the Kapustin Yar site by launching its weapons from as close to the combat lines as it can manage. So a Ukrainian strike on the Oreshnik launch base is possible. And if the January 17th report is true, Ukraine just showed Putin that it knows precisely what it needs to hit to make future Oreshnik strikes more difficult. Ukraine isn't taking any chances, and it's now trying to cut Oreshnik off at its launch point. But that doesn't answer the question of how much of a threat this missile actually poses to Ukraine. If Russia's claims that Oreshnik is nuclear capable are true, then the threat would be massive, assuming Putin ever descends so deeply into his mad pursuit of Ukraine that he would try to raze the country to the ground. But let's assume that he won't do that. Putin's meteorite comments have been accompanied by other claims, as Forbes reported in December. Specifically, Putin has claimed that several weapons that use warheads reliant on kinetic energy that all strike the same target would have an impact comparable in strength to a nuclear strike, adding, "We know in history what meteorites have fallen where and what the consequences were. Sometimes it was enough for whole lakes to form." Those claims don't quite gel with what the Chinese researchers mentioned earlier found, and Forbes offers its own technical analysis that generally agrees that Oreshnik isn't as scary as Russia claims. It says that the warhead containing the 6 re-entry vehicles carried by Oreshnik weighs about 1,800 pounds and impacts at Mach 10, as we mentioned earlier. That combination of weight and speed generates a lot of kinetic energy, about 3.6 billion joules of it, in fact. but a ton of TNT generates explosive energy equivalent to 4.4 billion joules. Ultimately, Forbes states, this means that a kinetic-armed Oreshnik delivers a force equivalent to a 2,000-pound bomb. That appears to assume the full weight of the warhead impacts rather than the submunitions contained within. Again, it's damaging, but Russia has been pelting Ukraine with weapons that generate this type of force or more already. And when you throw questionable accuracy into the mix, it's starting to look more and more like Russia has built itself a space-bound glide bomb for which close enough seems to be good enough when it comes to accuracy. The odds are that Russia is using Oreshnik more to place psychological pressure on Ukraine and the West than it is to do any real damage to Ukraine. The Jamestown Foundation made that point in a January 13th article, where it claimed that the strike point of Lviv was likely chosen so that Oreshnik could have a demonstrative effect on Russia's enemies. Oreshnik is a psyops weapon. It doesn't seem to be a truly practical one, especially if its warheads are flying blind. It's unknown exactly how much an Oreshnik missile costs Russia to build, though some estimates place the price as high as $30 million per unit. If that's the case, then Oreshnik is posture over practicality, speed over substance, a missile carrying a blind warhead that leaves Russia relying as much on luck as it does precision to conduct a successful strike. Nevertheless, Putin will still try to claim that Ukraine can't stop what's coming with the rise of Oreshnik. But Putin has his own problems at home. This winter may end up being the killer of Russia's economy, and Ukraine is a huge part of the reason why. Unstoppable, that's a word best used for what's coming to Russia, and you can find out why in our video. And if you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe to The Military Show for more coverage of the real stories behind Russia's weapons of supposed mass destruction. And thank you for watching.